LUSH is famous for their shampoo bars, but at $15 for a 55-gram bar, they can feel more like a once-in-a-while treat rather than an everyday shampoo. But what if I told you that you could make a LUSH-style conditioning shampoo bar at home for a fraction of the cost? I've teamed up with the wonderful folks at Bramble Berry to bring you a DIY conditioning shampoo bar that's much gentler and much cheaper than LUSH's Godiva bar. At the end, I'll even show you how to make them look just like a LUSH shampoo bar. I made lots of way too soft, sticky bars before finding the perfect balance between conditioning goodness, great cleansing, and a bar that lasts a long time in the shower, and I am really excited to share this free formulation with you. Let's get started. We're going to make a 500-gram batch today, which should make about 6 shampoo bars. We'll begin with something that'll seem a bit weird if you've ever made a shampoo bar before, but very familiar if you've ever made a conditioner bar. Weigh out 9.5 grams BTMS 50, and this is our conditioning star. Now, it's really important that this portion of the formulation is firm enough that it doesn't turn into greasy, soft spots in the finished bar. So, to keep things solid but not too solid, you'll need 19 grams refined cocoa butter and 14 grams stearic acid. Stearic acid in particular is a great hardener and does more to firm things up than the cocoa butter, even though there's less of it. Up next, for some luxurious hair-loving goodness, weigh out 2.5 grams marula oil. You could also use a different oil that your hair loves instead of marula oil. Argan oil, coconut oil, and jojoba oil would all be great choices. Combine all these ingredients in a small beaker or heat-resistant glass measuring cup, and then get them melting together over low heat, or with a few quick bursts in the microwave. This mixture is the conditioning part of our conditioning shampoo bar. It's basically a conditioner bar, but with some small tweaks to make it work well as part of a shampoo bar. Once everything has melted, we're ready to keep moving. We need to quickly add a bit of preservative to this mixture before it sets up. We'll use Optiphen Plus, which has a pretty high heat tolerance, but still shouldn't be heated above 80 degrees Celsius, and that's 175 degrees Fahrenheit for the Americans. If you don't have a thermometer, you can do what I did instead. The last thing to melt will be the stearic acid, which melts at about 69 degrees Celsius or 157 degrees Fahrenheit. When you can see just a few wee bits of solid stearic acid floating on top, give the beaker a bit of a swirl to get them to melt, pull the beaker off the heat, and add 0.75 grams Optiphen Plus. Every time I did this, I checked the temperature, and it was always well within the safe range for the preservative. Anyhow, quickly stir in the preservative and pour the mixture into a smallish mold. I'm using 1 cavity of Bramble Berry's 6-cavity silicone mold. The mixture will start to set up really fast, so scrape out as much as you can and don't worry if it looks a bit messy. It won't matter in the end. Pop your mold in the fridge to let the bar set up, and now it's time for the second phase of this DIY. The next set of ingredients we'll be working with are really lightweight and floaty and would love to take up residence in your airways if given the slightest chance. So, to not give them that chance, put on a well-fitting respirator. This part is not optional. During this phase of the DIY, we'll be weighing out the shampoo-y parts of this bar. This is where we get sudsy, but stay gentle. The bulk of the cleansing power comes from super gentle sodium cocoyl isothianate, also known as SCI, and sometimes called baby foam. I'm using it in its needle format, which also gives the finished bars a really neat LUSH-like appearance without using the much stronger surfactant that LUSH uses in their shampoo bars, sodium cocoa sulfate. So weigh out 200 grams SCI. Bramble Berry's SCI needles are a lot smaller than other SCI needles I've used, and I find this makes them easier to work with. If you've got bigger SCI needles, you want to break them up with your fingers a bit, and you may still need to adjust the formulation, but more on that later. Up next, for even more sudsy goodness, you'll need 107.75 grams sodium lauryl sulfoacetate, also known as SLSa. This is a gentle EcoCert surfactant and is very different from sodium lauryl sulfate or SLS, which is a much stronger cleanser. Our next ingredient is key to the versatility of this bar. You'll need 81 grams of white kaolin clay. And lastly, for a bit of color, you'll need 1.5 grams mica. I'm using this beautiful green mica as it is a perfect fit with the fragrance I'll be using later on. You can have a lot of fun with the color, but a word of warning here. Avoid earthy pinks and reds, unless you want to make shampoo bars that look like raw hamburger patties. Ew. We'll set those dry, powdery things aside and weigh out the last 5 ingredients in the formulation. The wet ones. To make the shampoo bars milder and boost flash foam, you'll need 46.25 grams of Cocamidopropyl Betaine. Cocamidopropyl Betaine is over 60% water, so this is where the bulk of the water in the formulation comes from. Up next, to make the shampoo smell amazing, some fragrance. I'm using Bramble Berry's brand new Wild Heather and Thyme fragrance. It's part of their new Flora Fusion collection. This fragrance smells to me like the cooler at a florist. It's fresh, green, clean, and oh so lightly floral. I've never found a fragrance like this before and I am quite smitten. You'll need 5 grams of your fragrance, and please have some fun here. I encourage you to match the fragrance to the mica you've chosen. I used apple sage for this earlier batch of green bars, and sea salt and lily for these blue bars. You'll remember we used a bit of preservative earlier, and now we need more to ensure the entire formulation is evenly preserved. Weigh out 6.75 grams Optiphen Plus, and this adds up to 1.5% across the entire formulation. This next ingredient can easily be customized to suit your hair type. I'm using 5 grams of rice curl complex to help my waves be bouncy and defined, but you could definitely use a liquid hydrolyzed protein or botanical extract here instead. And lastly, to bring the pH of these bars down a bit, 1 gram of citric acid. If you don't have citric acid, it isn't strictly required. Without it, the bars have a pH around 6, and with it, the pH is closer to 5. 6 is around the upper end of the pH range we generally want for a shampoo, but it's still safe. So if you don't have citric acid, replace it with a bit more clay in the powdered phase. Cover that beaker, set it aside, and go grab your conditioner bar from the fridge. It should be completely solid by now. Turn the bar out onto a cutting board and chop it up relatively finely. The biggest pieces should be no more than about 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch across, but most of them should be smaller than that. You'll be surprised at how big these small bits look once they're in the finished bars. Now that we've got all of our ingredients weighed out and the conditioner bar made, all that's left is to assemble the finished bars. This part is pretty straightforward, but there are a couple tricky things to watch out for. If you took your respirator off in the last little while, put it back on. You'll also want to put on a pair of nitrile or latex gloves at this point. Dump the SCI, SLSa, kaolin clay, and mica into a bowl and stir to combine. The mixture won't look very colorful right now, but don't worry, the mica will really come to life once it gets wet. Pour the beaker of wet things into the dry things and start mixing. You can start with a spoon or spatula if you want to, but you're going to need to switch to using your hands pretty quickly. Work the mixture into a dough, and once it starts to look pretty dry and you're not finding any more wet bits to work through, add the chopped up conditioner bar and start incorporating that as well. The mixture will look pretty dry and crumbly, but you'll find that when you squeeze a handful of it, it should hold together really well, and that is thanks to the kaolin clay. If the mixture seems a bit dry and isn't holding together well, add a few drops of distilled water, but go slowly here. A tiny bit of additional water can make a really big difference to how the dough feels and acts, even if it looks the same. This dough will get really sticky if you add too much water, and that is no fun to work with. If you've used larger SCI noodles, you might find the mixture is a bit too wet and sticky. If this is the case, knead in a small amount of extra clay and adjust future batches to use less Cocamidopropyl Betaine. Once you've got a crumbly but moldable mixture, it's time to turn that dough into bars. We can do this 3 different ways. I'm going to begin by dividing my dough into 6 80-ish gram lumps. Shaping strategy number 1 is hand shaping. Simply use your gloved hands to form the dough into a bar-shaped thing. Easy peasy. If you plan on going this route, you might find you prefer an ever so slightly damper dough. The second way to shape these bars is to smush the dough into a mold, and freezing can help with unmolding, especially if you're using a more detailed mold. And lastly, for that full lush look, you can press the bars. I'm using the Bath Bomb press with their 2 1/4 inch shampoo bar disc mold, but there are also some great hand press options like this one from Humblebee that are a lot more affordable. I found the easiest and cleanest way to press these bars was to sandwich the lump of dough between 2 rounds of plastic that I cut out from an old freezer bag. If you feel like your bars aren't smushing together as smoothly as you'd like, just re-crumble them, work in a wee bit more water, and try again. Don't they look delightfully lushy? You'll need to let the bars dry for about 3 days before they're ready to use, and you'll find they get really hard really fast. To use, massage into soaking wet hair to work up a luscious lather before rinsing out. After that, follow up with a conditioner. If you're looking for a nice, rich one, why not try customizing Bramble Berry's new hair mask base for a treat? I formulated it, and it's pretty lovely if I do say so myself. So watch this video next to learn how to customize it for your hair type. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to Bramble Berry for sponsoring this video. Bye!